Huples cat. Meow. And Becky. So as part of my pandemic series, I found this article. The article is, Are we preparing for the looming pandemic threat? It's written by Jonathan Quick, who's from the Harvard Medical School, and he's the chairman of the Global Health Council, and he wrote a book called The End of Epidemics. So I'm not doing the full article, but I'm going to read clips from it and then talk a little bit about it. So this will be fairly long, so you might want to go and get yourself a beer or a cup of tea. Somewhere out there is a dangerous virus is boiling up in the bloodstream of a bird, bat, monkey or pig, or English bull terrier, preparing to jump to a human being. It's hard to comprehend the scope of such a threat, for it has a potential to wipe out millions of us, including my family and yours, over a matter of weeks or months. The risk makes the threat posed by Islamic State, a ground war, a massive climate event, or even the dropping of a nuclear bomb on a major city pale by comparison. It depends on how easily the virus is spread and depends how effective it is. The other thing that's wrong in the opening of this article is that not all pandemics are viral. The vast majority are. But bacteria and fungus and prions and a whole bunch of other things can act in endemic and pandemic ways. So it's not just viruses. Once transmitted to a human, an airborne virus could pass from one infected individual, Becky infects me, Becky, and then I can infect about 25,000 people within a week. And more than 700,000 will be infected within the first month. Within 3 months it could spread to every major urban centre in the world, and by 6 months it could affect more than 300 million people and kill more than 30 million. Yeah, it could. It could be worse than that. We won't get into that in the article, because the article's there is to alarm but not freak people out. It's propaganda. He's wanting money to set up international antiviral task force, basically, to avoid a pandemic. Not all against you we can, but certainly we could spend more money on prevention. This is not alarmist science fiction. Bill Gates, hello, a multimillionaire with no science skills, who funds a group that uses computer simulation to predict the spread of diseases, said, "The Ebola epidemic showed me that we are not ready for a serious epidemic, an epidemic that would be more infectious and would spread faster than Ebola did." Well, yeah, but I don't think you need I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. He put the likelihood of a catastrophic epidemic as well over 50% in his lifetime. What the heck does Bill Gates know? Is Bill Gates quoting science? Celebrity business owners are not the people to get your science information from. A catastrophic epidemic. Now, we don't know. It may well happen in our lifetime. It may well not happen in our lifetime. It has happened in the past, and it will happen again. To say it's well over 50%, I don't know if that's true. Catastrophic. That is, society ends for a while. Gates' model, it's not his model. He paid some cash to people to make this model, and there's no links to the model or the science research behind the model. Estimated a perilous virus carried via cars, planes, ships and trains and spreading quickly in packed cities could kill up to 33 million people in just over 200 days. Absolutely it could. And I don't think that's catastrophic. I think it will be a serious ding, but there's a lot of people. Now, if it kills over 333 million in 200 days, which a catastrophic virus easily could, that's going to have a big problem for everybody for a while. In the last century alone, smallpox killed 300 to 500 million people. Think on that. There was a lot less people. The 1918 to 1919 Spanish flu killed 50 to 100 million. We've no idea how many it killed. We know it killed a huge amount of people. And it actually broke society down and altered society in North America and Canada and England and Europe for quite some time. And if you have any interest in pandemic, research on the Spanish influenza. It's interesting. Society broke down in ways that made it much more controlled. There was not rioting and looting and mass starvation. What happened was that there was a mass control from the government to get over it. There was mass propaganda of media and stuff like that. How that would play out now, I don't know. Talks about the 40 million people that died since AIDS was first diagnosed in 1981. That's true. The interesting one in this is about Ebola. The latest Ebola epidemic, the one everybody was freaking out about last year, took over, they estimate, 11,000 lives. A drop in the bucket, if you think about the number of people. That particular Ebola crisis, remember Ebola comes in waves. The actual one that happened last time was 7 times the death total of all of the previous recorded 22 Ebola epidemics. We quickly have problems. For example, airborne AIDS or airborne Ebola would be absolutely very contagious and absolutely catastrophic. I think from prepping and emergency preparedness point of view, the big fear of pandemic is that you don't really know what to do to avoid getting it. it would be hugely problematic to avoid getting it, and you need a lot of luck. So that's one of the things I'm going to do in the series, is that if you're lucky enough not to get it, these are the things that you may be able to do to prevent yourself from then developing it. Epidemics are also a force of social good. The Black Death is what really gave franchise to males in England and much more economic power to males in England in the 14th century. In the early stages of a new epidemic, before it has been recognised or how it spreads has been determined, and before appropriate protection measures are in place, health workers die in high numbers. So that's one of the things I've said before. If you know healthcare workers, keep in touch with them, get them to trigger alert you if they see people going off sick at work. They're co-workers. Healthcare workers generally are fairly healthy in terms of infectious diseases because we're around so many of them. If you have no healthcare worker, especially in a major city, a major urban area, let them know, let them text you if they start to see lots of people getting sick in their workplace. That would be a sign that, hey, something might be going on and it might be time to start stocking up and getting the water supplies in place, etc. As with war, where common illness can take more lives than war injuries, epidemics sometimes take more lives from disruption of primary health care than from the epidemic itself. Yes, so have good quality nursing medical textbooks, have the ability to self-diagnose and self-medicate if required, bearing in mind that for a period of time, official healthcare may be unavailable to you. Ambulances may not be responding, hospitals may be closed. That will probably kill more people in our society than the actual pandemic itself. How much would it cost? How much would a pandemic cost? Who knows? Nobody's got a clue. The bottom line is, this again is really underestimating a catastrophic pandemic. They're saying 5 to 10% of global GDP could be destroyed in the first year. I would say it's going to be maybe higher than that. They also put the cost at $3.5 trillion American, which is actually worse than the financial crisis of 2008. Every year the world spends an estimated $50 billion on direct control of epidemics such as avian influenza, HIV, malaria and polio. And they estimate in this article an extra $50 billion is spent a year. Lack of tourism in those areas and all those indirect costs. So they reckon it's about $100 billion a year. Over 10 years we spend about $1 trillion on infectious diseases and outbreak control, which is an interesting fact. So what the article ends up saying is that we need to actually spend $1 per person each year for the next 10 years and actually stop global pandemics from happening by having task forces that zap in and quarantine and investigate the area as soon as it comes onto the global consciousness. I think that's overestimating our ability. I think what we definitely need to do is look at how we as a society view the health of other people in other nations and maybe do some concrete and effective measures that they want us to do to help with their own surveillance and community healthcare. That's another topic, to be honest with you. Scientists don't know which microbe it will be, where it will come from, or whether it will be transmitted through the air, or by touch, or by bodily fluids, or by a combination of routes. It's like an earthquake, they say. Big catastrophic pandemic is signalled by lots of smaller little pandemics that are popping up. A good question that is asked in this article, the obvious question is this: why aren't we deploying absolutely everything we have to make sure that the next disease outbreak does not turn into a global catastrophe? And this gentleman comes up with 3 answers. First, there is fear. We're all terrified of death. We respond to the fear of epidemic disease by wanting to blame someone else. We like to blame other people because then it's their fault. They get the disease because they're bad people, they're not us, therefore we won't get the disease because I can't comprehend getting the disease and I can't comprehend dying. The interesting thing with this, he says that scared people over-personalise the news and their worries increase. That's definitely true about everything. It's a major driving engine of clickbait videos, by the way. When this happens, we let it override our rationality and we make things much worse. That's also very true. The second reason we're not dealing with this is denial and complacency, and he blames the political leaders of public health officials. He says that denial undermines the very trust we need to combat an epidemic, and complacency sets in every time an epidemic comes and goes. We feel that we will have the vaccine in time and technology will save us. It won't be us that die, it will be them. So we don't spend any more money on basic prevention than we're already doing. I think that's pretty true. Humans are fairly short-sighted. There's always competing demands for cash. Financial self-interest. I like this. Vaccines are developed for rich people because rich people can pay for them, otherwise we don't bother. How many times do governments and leaders plead there is no budget for preparedness? How many times do people plead they don't have a budget preparedness. How many disease-fostering agribusiness companies line the pockets of politicians who conveniently overlook the threats bubbling up from factory farm sewage? That's another issue. If you eat meat and dairy products and fish products, you probably aren't really considering animal rights or animal cruelty. Okay, I think you should. On a selfish level, you absolutely should, because by consuming cheap meat, cheap dairy, cheap fish, what you're doing is you're having these accumulations of animals in very unnatural conditions, pooping and dying and being slaughtered quickly and efficiently, which means cheaply, and actually it's putting you at risk from a pandemic. All kinds of complex and interconnected social, economic and environmental risk factors contribute to the emergence and spread of disease. But then they mention population. I think population is an interesting one. Not wanting to get too Malthusian on you all, but the population is more than 7.5 billion people. And it's projected to be over 9.5 billion people by 2050. It's only like 31 years away from now. Now, more than half of the increased number are going to be born on the continent of Africa. And most of those people born on the continent of Africa will be crammed into cities without basic services and sanitation, which means that those cities are going to be hotspots for infection. Infection happens, quarantine will be difficult, educational spread will be, to stop the spread will be difficult. But that is also blaming Africa, making them different. Yes, it's realistic, but I would argue downtown Toronto, Chicago, New York, LA, there's lots of areas in the West that are also likely hotspots for infection. The more people there are, the more demand there is for shelter, food and water, right? So we are clear-cutting areas. Now he blames agricultural business rather than the individual person trying to survive in the continent of Africa for this. But the interesting thing is that by clear-cutting, by chopping every tree down to grow crops and burning the trees as well, that brings the people who are doing that and then living there much in closer contact with primates, rodents and bats that carry dangerous pathogens. If you are very, very hungry, you are going to eat rat, you are going to eat monkey, you'll eat bull terriers. So the behaviour is rational. So it's easy for us to say, they shouldn't do that, they shouldn't eat bushmeat. They're going to eat bushmeat if they don't have an alternative. So part of what we could do is actually make sure they have food security in poorer parts of the world, and we could do that quite cheaply. Clear cutting actually causes flooding, and flooding will attract mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are a vector, they're a carrier of infection. The hotter the jungle and the planet becomes as a result of just all this deforestation, because climate change is making the world each year progressively warmer on average. That's an absolute scientific fact. We're brewing up the perfect storm for the development of viruses and bacteria and fungi that can spread and cause harm to human beings. And we're putting human beings in closer and closer contacts to those areas that are likely to do that. And at the same time, we're moving people around the world in incredible amounts of numbers. On average, 10 million of us, each and every day, get on an aeroplane and fly somewhere. Over 3.5 billion passengers on average. Now, a lot of people fly more than once, but on average, that's the number of flights that human beings are taking. But we all know that you can get infected with some disease and have no signs or symptoms for a period of days to weeks. So you can have the disease, get the disease, come home, and then infect everybody. The truth of it is, and this is the other truth of this, Ebola, AIDS and Zika, which you've probably heard about, they happened before 1950. Nobody really noticed them because they were in small parts of Africa and nobody cares a damn about Africa apart from Africans, but the world doesn't see them as people or people of any interest to us. They were three of just nearly 400 infectious diseases that we've identified in the last 75 years. Since 1971, scientists have discovered at least 25 new pathogens, which we have no vaccines for, and we have no treatments for. It's kind of crazy that we would have identified a pathogen, a virus or a bacteria or a fungus that we know can cause human harm and death, but we don't bother to develop treatment. We know how to stop the next epidemic. There is no excuse for unpreparedness. If we are to save ourselves and our children, we must act decisively. The threat is real, the pathway is known, the time for action is now. They're not going to act, so you need to act. The challenge is real from pandemics, and the scary thing with pandemics is it'll take a lot of luck not to get it. That's all from me, that's all from Mistress Becky, and that's all from Mr. Bear, who's found a bone. Love you all, and I'll see you all in a bit. Au revoir.